Hi, it's Alistair at Electric Scotland. Just doing my weekly newsletter again for, let's see, it's for July the 11th. Right, July the 11th. In this newsletter, I've given you a wee bit of an article about smoking. As you may know, I am a smoker, and of course, travelling around the world, one's finding it harder to find hotels or guest houses that will allow you to smoke. I did actually contact Trivago, who's been doing a lot of advertising, and they sent quite a nice email back to me saying that it is very difficult to actually document this, because they said there's a lot of countries that now do a block no smoking ban, and so it's increasingly difficult for them to identify hotels that will allow smoking. But they said they would consider doing it. I've actually contacted Unique Cottages, who is Mark Breed, who owns the company. He's been a long time advertiser on the site, and if you look at our header, underneath the header is Unique Cottages, so they're on every page of the site, and they apparently do some good business through us, which is great. But I thought I'd just ask him about this no smoking thing, and he says the cottage search page has a filter under property restrictions, a drop down box, which allows you to search on smokers accepted. And if check this filter and one for pets, it should return a list of available pet and smoking friendly houses. And I did actually do a search for the smoker friendly and also Wi-Fi, and I got 2 hotels were listed, one of which I would have been happy to book if I've been going to Scotland for a holiday. So I don't know, it's maybe worth your while trying it out and see what you think. I've actually asked Mark for a couple of other bits of information from him, because I know there's a lot of clan societies that organise clan events in Scotland, and I know they always have a problem finding accommodation, so I've asked him if he might become an agent for such clans to find their accommodation for them. So anyway, hopefully we'll come back with something for us on that front. The other thing I'm raising in this particular newsletter is to clans, families, societies, and Highland Games organisations, St Andrews societies, and Scottish businesses. Basically, I'm looking at reworking the advertising on my website. The reason for that is because I'm now retired and now in receipt of some pretty good pensions. I don't actually need as much money as I once did. So I was kind of thinking to myself, maybe I could do something that might benefit the smaller businesses and clan societies. Don't know what you think, but I've put down a few suggestions, and I'm saying it might cost you $25 a month or even just $10 a month. And so I would appreciate it if you're a member of a clan society, that you might have a read at my ideas and come back to me with any suggestions, basically. I mean, I know at the end of the day, like, $10 a month is not a great deal of money, certainly, and neither is really $25 a month. But if there was enough interest that would give me my minimum, because I'd need a minimum of $500 a month to maintain my hosting and site search facilities. So if I can raise just $500 a month from a variety of groups, then that would be great. So maybe have a think, and if you've any other ideas, please come back to me. Okay, so on to the news. First story I've got is help us stop BBC bias. This is a new campaign by David Akili, who monitors the corporation's output for News Watch. He is seeking a judicial review into how the BBC measures its own impartiality, and has launched a crowdfunding appeal to back his Help Us Stop BBC Bias campaign. So I've given you a link, you can read more about it, and if you want to support it, there'll be a link to that as well. Okay, so next one is African leaders launch free trade zone. Said African leaders met on Sunday to launch a continental free trade zone that, if successful, would unite 1.3 billion people, creating a 3.4 trillion economic bloc and usher in a new era of development. I have been sent you a few stories about this in the past, but it looks like it's starting to really take off, which is very encouraging. And of course, as you know, many of these African members are in the Commonwealth. So it could be excellent for a free trading Brexit Britain. Okay, next story I have, Labour's ambitions trump the need of British Jews. It says, Labour is now seen as a safe space for anti-Semites, should at least be acknowledged. That's the CapEx story as it happens. Next story is new children's laureate wants to take on TV. This is from the BBC in actual fact. It says Cassandra Cowell, who has been named as the new children's laureate, is ready to do battle to encourage children to love books. And I've said you might also like to visit our page, which contains some 800 free children's stories. I've given you a link to our page, but if you just look at children's stories in the main menu at the top of every page, you'll get to easily there. But I've given you a link to the bigger story, and hopefully you might want to read that. Okay, why do so many people buy electric car, or why do so few people buy electric cars rather? The government's enthusiasm for electric cars is well known. So this is an article about why so few are actually buying them. You might want to read that, just check out what's going on. It's from John Redwood MP. Next story is Glaswegian chef living in Australia exports one of Scotland's top inventions down under. So now, in another Australian chapter in Scotland's history of innovation and international entrepreneurship, Spain, we have exported the Munchies box to Australia. So if you don't know a Munchies box, do read the article. Labour's misguided energy policy is already costing Britain. So the prospect of a Corbyn-led government has long been considered the biggest risk facing the UK's economy. Okay, next story is Buccleuch holds talks with communities over south of Scotland land. I carried the story about his selling, I think it's 250,000 acres of land in the south of Scotland. And obviously this is progressing, and it says it is now confirmed that 2 communities have expressed an interest in buying some or all of the land. So really interesting, that. Next story is Pentland tidal energy scheme could outgun Dounreay. I've been to Dounreay. I must confess that they had very slim white coats, and I must confess the biggest one they found I couldn't actually button it, so I remember that was fun, but I've been through Dounreay. It's quite an interesting place. That's that one with the big dome, basically. It says full build out would represent a capacity which is 50% higher than Dounreay, the Caithness nuclear power plant that is currently undergoing long-term decommissioning. So, and this is tidal power, which has been struggling in the past, but it looks like we've got breakthroughs at long last there now. Because wind power is what everyone knows about. This is tidal power, which in theory wouldn't give it such a blot of the landscape, and could be very good for Scotland, certainly, and anywhere that's on the coast of the world. Okay, next story is Europe should brace for the US tariffs on several fronts, says a German official. Says Trump administration nonetheless appeared poised to impose tariffs over dispute about aircraft subsidies, the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, and European car imports. I've been warning about this coming for some time. Looks like it's getting closer. That's why we need to be out of the EU, because we won't be caught up in these battle tariffs with the US. The Irish government has revealed the bad faith with which the EU has treated the border issue. But it's now become totally clear that the EU's position on the border was falsely peddled in order to exercise maximum pressure on the UK. Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. You should read that. Okay, next story I've got is Mark Carney finally drops his Project Fear as he admits the UK is ready for no deal. Britain's banks hold enough capital to cope with both a no-deal Brexit and a global trade war, Bank of England governor said, but warned leaving the European Union on WTO terms would still tighten financial conditions for businesses and families. The next story I got is the Brexit Party unpatriotic. Farage can back Trump to the hilt, or he can back Britain. He can't do both. So an interesting take, and maybe worth the read. It's time for Britain to get tough with Iran is a CapEx story. The UK has options as its disposal to deal with Iran. Because Britain took over that Iranian tanker sending oil to Syria, Britain's been threatened by Iran, and indeed 3 boats of Iran tried to interfere with a British tanker, but luckily the British Navy was there and interceded and saw them off. But clearly it's getting a bit concerning, that, so that's a topical story worth a read. Okay, so that's the news stories I've got for you this week. Electric Canadian, I've got the Canadian Horticulturalist. I actually had more copies than I thought of that, so you're getting the 1911 one, and I'm thinking I can bring you up to the wartime on that, which would be good. So it's the 1911 edition that I've got up this week. Gaelic Folk Songs of Canada is by Alexander Fraser, published in 1903. So you can read this, and the English translations are in it. Really, really interesting book, that. Canadian Motor, Tractor and Implement Trade Journal. And then there I'm highlighting, this is volume 11 I've got up, the 1900 edition. It says, do read the story. Rosenheim buys a farm, on page 13. And I've given you a link to the book. It's basically, he's got a Scottish business, and it's kind of interesting, his thoughts on how he thinks he can make more money by having a farm, because he's just bought a load of eggs, which he considers very expensive. So he's thinking, I'll have a farm to bring out his own chickens and make lots of money. Canadian Druggist, Volume 1, 1899, or sorry, 1889. I've got a copy of that up. I've also got a nice wee article, Oscar Peterson, Fisherman. It's an interesting article from Canadian History magazine. So if OCR then, you can read that on the site. I've also got the Canadian Therapeutist and Sanitary Engineer, incorporating the Canadian Journal of Public Health. This is Volume 1, Issue 6, which is June 1910. And I just note, by the way, that when I'm adding new magazines to the site, I'm also adding them to the magazine page, index page. And when I do that, if I find there's other copies available in the archive, I give you a specific link, and that link will go to the search page for that term, for that. So in that case, I think there's another 26 issues of the Canadian Druggist that you could read. So that's what I'm doing, making a habit of doing now. So whenever I add a new Canadian magazine, I always add it to the magazine index page, which you can see if you look at the header of the site. You'll see magazines. Just click that, and you go to that page. And I say I'm always putting a link to the Internet Archive if there's further copies to be found. Okay, so that's the Electric Canadian for this week. On Electric Scotland, I've got The Blood is Strong. It is no joy without Clan Donald. It's an interesting video which you can watch, and I've given you a link to it. Registrum Episcopatus Brahminales. You're not very good at pronouncing that for sure. It's by Patrick Chalmers of Ald Bar. It's in 2 volumes. It's mostly in Latin, but there is an excellent preface and also a good wee biography of the author, and he's quite a character. So some of the texts are also in Scots, so you can probably make that up a bit. Unless you can read Latin. A large chunk of the book is unreadable, basically. So I added this to the weekend page. Okay, the next thing is a report on the Lechman evictions in Inverness in 1892 by Alexander Mackenzie. So we'll see that in for you. Then Protestant exiles from France in the reign of Louis XIV, or the Huguenot refugees and the descendants in Great Britain and Ireland, with the Reverend David G. A. Agnew. It's a second edition, and it's in 3 volumes, produced in 1871, which is added to our Scots and France page. There's a lot of information about the Scots Huguenots. Okay, the next one I've got up is an estimate of Scottish nobility during the minority of James VI. It was preliminary observations by the Reverend Charles Rogers. This was produced in 1873. It's quite an interesting book, that. Okay, the next story I've got is estimate of the genealogy of the house and surname of Seton. That's S-E-T-O-U-N or S-E-T-O-N. Basically, it's by Sir Richard Maitland of Leadington. He's a knight, and the Chronicle of the House of Seton, compiled in Metra by John Kennington, whose alias is Peter Main. He was produced in 1830. So if you're a Seton, you'll enjoy that book. Then the next one is Trump tariffs, because you've obviously heard about Trump threatening tariffs on the EU. Apparently that tariffs include Scotch whisky. So this is a new poem from the Bard of Banff, Stan Bruce, who's sent a poem trying to persuade him not to please put tariffs on Scotch whisky. And he's also got a poem about his grandfather, which he sent in with it. Okay, then a story, Middlemarch, a study of Provincial Life by George Eliot. It's a new edition produced in 1891. We've got Native Tribes of Britain. This is an audio file. It's available, and the first 7 minutes or so detail the Scottish tribes. There's also a BBC page which I've produced a link to at the foot of our Clans and Families page. You can listen to this and I've given you a link to the Internet Archive where it can be listened to. Then we've got Clan Wallace Society. I've added the Winter and Spring 2019 newsletters, which are always an interesting read. I've also been working this week with Clan McInnes. Very much thanks to their Vice President, because he's been very cooperative and helpful, and so I've added quite a wee bit to the clan, and also he sent me in 2 of the more recent newsletters, and he seems that he might be able to send me in others as they come out, so if so, we'll start again regularly. And I must say it's a very excellent newsletter with great content, one of the better newsletters certainly from the Clan Society, so quite amazed at the quality he's got there, so well worth a read, even if you're not a Clan McInnes chap. And then finally, the Presbytery of Ross and Sutherland between 1683 and 1700. It's by the Reverend Professor Donald MacLean. So it's got some interesting information on there. I've actually added it to a Brecon page because it's mostly about, Sutherland page rather. So that's, but I'll give you a direct link to the PDF so you can get it from there. And then the story this week, I've decided to make it on scam calls because I got an email in with this article and thought I'd make it the story for this week. It's what spam is to email, robocalls are to your phone. They're annoying, automated, and often illegal pre-recorded messages. Cyber criminals use robocalls to steal information and money from victims. So it says the volume of robocalls continues to grow, having reached an estimated 3.4 billion in April 2018. So it goes through a lot of interesting stuff, and I thought you should be educated on that, which, I mean, I'm an educational site, which means education, and so I'm hoping that you might find this particularly interesting. It's quite a decent article. Came from the Malwarebytes, which I have on my computer, I might add. So I thought perhaps you might be interested in that. Okay, so that's it for this week. Basically, I hope you enjoy the read, and obviously look forward to getting any comments from you. And remember, you can always suggest new things to try or things you'd like to find out about, but maybe can't find them on the web or something, and maybe I can find them for you. So, do have a conversation with me. I'm always happy to hear from you. If you don't like something, let me know. If you like something, let me know. And if you have suggestions about things I might do in the future, let me know. But unless you let me know, I can't follow up on anything. So you'll just have to stick with my ideas of what you might like, rather than put a direct feed in. Okay, anyway, that's it. So hope you have a great weekend when it comes.